Corta esse cabelo, menina!
Naquele momento, vi aquele rapaz magrinho se transformar num super-herói.
I want to know, how was the makeup and prosthetics process to get into the character?
Well, there's two phases of it. One is figuring it out, and that's before the movie starts. And that's a lot of conversations. It's a lot of looking at, I didn't even know what Colonel Tom Parker looked like. And so you look at what the face, the head, the bald, the weight, how essentially, fat he was. But then there comes something else of, is enough of me going to be buried and yet at the same time some degree of countenance that can still come out. I wanted to be able to have a malleable face, and sometimes that amount of prosthetics locks you into something and suddenly you can't raise an eyebrow without there being this odd kind of like wrinkle in your bald pate. Then there was too, we had done all of that, we had done a huge amount of it, it looked pretty great. And I think Baz and I were both going, and we both decided that the nose had to be altered. And when you just say, hey guys, hey makeup experts, come up with a nose, they all go like, okay, all right. Give us some time. So that's the first thing. The second thing is putting it on every day, which is just waiting. The people work very, very hard, and nothing is expected of me except to sit there and shut up.
How long?
Oh, about 5 hours, but you get up, stretch your legs, have a cup of coffee, go to the bathroom, have a bowl of cereal and a piece of toast, come back in for the second 3-hour blast. But in all honesty, all I had to do was wait, and eventually it got done. And whenever I opened my eyes from like meditating or sleeping or disappearing into the land of the comatose, I always opened up my eyes and said, oh, holy cow, guys, man, oh man.
Besides COVID, what do you think that is the most difficult thing during the production?
Movies are hard to make, and it never gets, there's not a day that's easy, There's always some element to it that has to be this manufactured artistry that is completely fake. And that's hard to get into and forget that it's fake in order to make real. I would say I had a relatively easy time of it compared to Austin. I think the hardest thing of it was his amount of constant, never-ending preparation for it, because he was either in training, he was singing, he was in choreography, he was in a million wardrobe fittings, in order to not just be a character, but to accurately have the authenticity of all of the color, all of the imagery that we know that we make familiar with Elvis Presley. And I think I don't think there was ever a moment in which he wasn't being altered or tweaked or slightly reimagined, even in between shots.
Baz, why did you choose Elvis to be your next movie?
Yeah, well, I've been saying it and I've been thinking about it. And I'm not telling the story of a guy, or it's not a biopic, but he's such a window, in a way, into where we are now. If you want to think about where we are now, you have to think about where we come from. And particularly in the American century, America in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s kind of forms us, certainly formed me, pop culture particularly. And he's at the center of it, in good ways and bad ways and wonderful ways and spiritual ways. And so, like Shakespeare would take a historical figure and make a big idea, he's a canvas. And his relationship to Colonel Tom Parker, played by Tom Hanks, the cell and the soul. That's what those two characters represent. So it's a two-hander, really. Even though it's called Elvis, it's actually Colonel Tom Parker's story about Elvis.
What caught your attention and made you realize that Austin is going to be Elvis?
It's well known now that he almost spiritually needed to play Elvis because he and Elvis share this sadness that they lost their mother at exactly the same age. And he sends me a tape of him singing Unchained Melody in a bathrobe. And he's singing to his mum. And it was not really an audition tape, it was this personal experience. And there was the phone from Denzel Washington saying, you're going to meet someone who just works like no one else. But all of that aside, it wasn't like a decision. It was almost like he walked into the room, and from that moment on, I was just kind of like rehearsing him or testing him or getting him ready. Or I'm sort of a coach. By the way, Polly Bennett, who's the movement coach, she's a big part of this too. I got to shout her out.
First, I want to know, how was your reaction when you find out that you're going to be Elvis?
I was very happy. I was very happy.
Did you cry?
I didn't shed a tear at that moment because it was happiness followed immediately by I got to get down to work. But I've had many other moments where I've cried in the process.
Now, there's an awesome scene, a lot of them, but there's one, the first time that Elvis is dancing and singing and other girls are freaking out. And it's a very nice and funny scene to watch. How was it for you to shoot it?
The one in the pink suit?
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
first one. That was such an incredible moment to film because it's the moment that he's first learning. It's like learning he has superpowers. You know, that moment where you don't quite know what you're doing and you're suddenly experiencing reaction. And that he tells that story multiple times, and so finally getting to do that, and it was a blast.
Did you feel pressure because of Priscilla and Lisa Marie?
Oh yeah. I mean, this is Priscilla's husband. This is Lisa Marie's father, and yeah, it's an immense amount of pressure I felt.
And how are you feeling now with people watching the movie, people loving the movie, with Priscilla in love with you?
I could not be happier. Really, I keep saying this, I'm like pinching myself. It feels like a dream. No bit of work has ever meant more to me. And I've never poured more of my own soul and all of me into something. And I finished filming it, and I didn't know what the outcome was going to be. Mm-hmm. And there was many sacrifices and stuff in the process, and you just hope that it's going to mean something. And the fact that it's meant something to them, I'm beyond words.
You feel pressure of studios and financiers and things like that. You want to make sure you don't want them to lose faith. But the faith of Priscilla and the faith of Lisa Marie, I only met them briefly, and then we were estranged by the pandemic. Their faith in you is a weight, and the weight of making the movie is one thing, but the weight of having someone's father or husband or grandfather's life in your hands, because a movie is a powerful instrument, and you can really do damage with it. Storytelling is a powerful instrument, and you can damage things with it. So to do the opposite of damage, to make them feel that the humanity of Elvis and the relevance of Elvis and why he's relevant today and will always be relevant, his story.
To feel her approval, it feels like I can finally breathe after all these years. Absolutely, yeah. It's so incredible to have her support and to have the whole family support as well. It's just out of this world, more than we could have ever asked for.
And is it hard to play a living and a real person?
Yes and no. I think yes, because you know what you have to do. It's right there, and also it can be hard too because it is all there, and you know that the comparisons will also happen. I'm really glad that I had this opportunity. I think it's a test to sort of step into this space and step into the shoes of somebody who will eventually watch the film. So yeah, I had a lot of fun with it.
In the movie, we're transported to the 50s, and how was it for you to shoot in that environment?
It was insane. How many days do you get to go and teleport into a different time period, and the detail that they put in those sets, like literally we're in the middle of Australia, mind you, and there's like Bill Street, full on, like every shop, every detail from candy in jars, and all the extras are running around in costumes, so it feels real. You really think that you're like, for sometimes I go, I'm BB King and can't nobody tell me otherwise.
It felt at home, but it felt very informative because you really find where it all came from. Like, these are the people that started this style and this wave. And when I see Little Richard, I also see Prince and Andre 3000 and Miguel. And Little Richard is the first one to set this bar for sure.
Yeah, and like the sets were like unreal. Like, so you have to like imagine that we're building like a bunch of blocks of Beale Street in Australia. Like, and there are a bunch of kangaroos, like, just off to, like, the right side of the set. And they're getting high on methane, aka farts, who'd have thunk it. And at one time, they said there was, like, a kangaroo at the top of the street. And they're like, if anyone catches this kangaroo in shot, no one's gonna believe this is Beale Street anymore. But, like, so I was just like, but it, like, take away the kangaroo. Like, everything is researched down to the shade of paint. Like, it's impossible to not feel like utterly transported because just the level of research is like so particular, so focused and so purposeful. I think it's the purpose. It's like we want people to feel like a tangible attachment to this era and maybe something they would have never got to see because of segregation. You know, you don't see streets of black people all just turned up in 50s garb. That's not something that we see a lot in, you know, the media that we get. We don't get these beautiful portrayals of like, you know, black extras just like being all fabulous and turned out. And so they've really made that like the most like tactile and delectable thing.
And my last question, do you have a favorite scene?
There is, because we didn't get to see each other very much, the scenes with Austin are very, very, I'd like to think they were special for both of us because there wasn't any other distraction of it. And the scene on the Ferris wheel when I went to represent him, I think is incredible for two things. One, we got to shoot it for the better part of the day, which was very, very pleasant. But the other thing too is we saw these two important characters at their absolute most honest. You know, Elvis Presley said, I've always been looking for somebody like her. That's true. He even said, who's that guy? Maybe he could represent me. And for Colonel Tom Parker, he knew that he was signing on to a single client with a strategy that was going to map out the next 30-year trip to some brand of eternity. And lo and behold, the Colonel made that happen, you know, with all sorts of, you know, checkered moments along the way. But though that scene between Elvis and the Colonel, that was a great day.
Whoa.